Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. This is Eisenherz and today I have a special guest with me. You know him very well from a lot of videos on my channel, but also as the meme lord or the tournament writer. Please welcome Memo.
Hey guys, happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here, Memo. Can you please introduce yourself, Memo? We know that you're a brewer, but what qualifies you to teach us about tournament cEDH?
Yeah, gladly. So my name is Memo. I have been playing EDH since Ikoria, so not too long ago. I started playing cEDH, I think, a year after Ikoria released, should be around 2020. Yeah, and I've been hooked since then. I brewed a lot of decks and I have been playing online tournaments since last autumn. I attended around 10 online tournaments maybe, and one in-person tournament last week.
And you made pretty good results there, as far as I know.
Especially this year. This year has been going great for me. I made four top 4 cuts since January, so I'm pretty happy about my performance.
That's
although sadly I didn't win the tournament yet, but
that's just a matter of time. Just a matter of time. That will happen soon.
Hopefully.
So let's get started with the video. Today we're going to talk about how to get into tournament EDH. As the first question, how is a cEDH tournament structured? Because I've personally only played 1v1 tournaments. When I was younger, I used to play T2 tournaments. So how is a cEDH tournament structured?
So it depends, but in the past there have been different kind of structures to tackle the 4-player Magic tournament environment. But I think the one structure that that is kind of dominant right now is the Swiss. So you will have something between 3 to 6 Swiss rounds over 1 or 2 days, and if you're like doing well in the Swiss, you might have a chance of making the top 16 cut. Those will be, it's usually top 16. Sometimes there's a top 40 cut, depending on how many people are attending. Anyways, like the winners of the top cut will advance to the finals, which is held by the top 4 players of the top cut.
Okay, so you have a Swiss round where you play against random people, and then depending on if you win or lose or have a draw, you get points, right?
Exactly. And the special thing about the Swiss round is if you win and you advance to the next round, you will most likely play versus other winners or versus other people who drew like you, or versus other people who lost like you. So that's how it should be. Obviously, sometimes you end up in a pot with someone who made a draw or lost, but especially at the beginning, that's how the programs are usually pairing the players.
Okay, so if you play in the Swiss rounds and you win, you will play against better opponents in the next round, right? So
exactly.
You should try to win early on so you get to play against better competitors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, especially if it comes down to the tie breaks for like, let's say the top 16 cut. It's important who has the better tiebreakers, and those are determined by your opponent's win rate. So if you beat good players, it's more likely that you advance to the top 16 if you have the same amount of points as someone who won versus worse opponents.
Oh, okay.
So you should try, obviously, to win as many games as you can, but especially if you win your first couple of games, it's usually easier to calculate how to play out the last games.
Okay, so and then after you made the top 16 cut, so let's say you won a few rounds, you had a draw, and then you advanced to the top 16. How's the top 16 different from the Swiss rounds?
So I always say the Swiss is like a jungle, so it's pretty wild out there. You will face a lot of different archetypes and decks in the Swiss rounds. In the top 16, it's usually a bit more calm. You see more meta decks, and it's usually a bit easier to anticipate the opposing decks. Also, what I noticed that the top 16 is usually a bit calmer. People are sometimes keeping slower and safer hands and will not mull as aggressively sometimes.
Okay, so and then in the top 16 there is no point system, right? So you either win or you lose.
Exactly.
And then there should be 4 tables, and then the 4 winners will be put in the top 4 table.
Yeah. At least that was for the online tournaments I attended. That's the structure. I know there have been, I think it was Pond City 1 or Oktoberfest, I'm not sure, where they had the top 40 cut, but the usual cut is top 16 when it's around 128 players.
Okay. And then you win your game in the top 16, you advance to the top 4 table, and then the winner of that game is basically the winner of the tournament. And there's no second placing, there's only like, you either are a winner or you are top 4.
Yes, if they release the deck lists, so it's kind of weird, like the last Mox Masters, I made the finals, but in the overall, after they released the deck lists, in the overall placements, I was, I think, 7th or 6th. But because the top 16 ranking goes after points and after opposing win rate, and there were players who did not make the finals, but that had more points and better tiebreakers.
Oh, okay.
But there's only one winner. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So now that we know how a tournament cEDH tournament is structured, what is different in a tournament than in regular cEDH? How do the decks look like? What's just different in the gameplay?
So there are a couple of differences, a couple of nuances. So first and foremost, especially in the Swiss, people will play what they have and what they like. That's just the EDH spirit. That's also very prevalent in cEDH. There are a couple of meta cards I would highly recommend playing in tournaments, which you maybe won't play in your normal casual cEDH games. There's also stuff you should tech against, which has been prevalent quite a lot. One popular example, at least in my experience, has been Dreaded Magistrate. This is a card which seems to be very prevalent in online tournaments. I think my last tournament, I had multiple Dreads on turn 1 or turn 2 in every single Swiss round. So just make sure that your deck functions around Dreaded Magistrate and doesn't get shut off completely, or if it does, just run enough interaction to get rid of it. Another card I can highly recommend is Mindbreak Trap if you're on blue. It's a very versatile card. I know it's not protecting your own win attempt most likely, but just 75% of the time it's not your turn. And Mindbreak Trap has been a huge inclusion for me also in the proactive decks, but also the more controller decks, because it's just very, very important to interact with your opponents for free. And free interaction is really, really broken in cEDH. That's a bit different from normal EDH, normal cEDH, where you maybe not have to fine-tune that much.
Okay, so you will see different cards and you will have to tech against different stuff because it's more prevalent in a tournament environment. Are there any other differences? So as far as I know, some tournaments have like a 75-minute rule, some have like a 95-minute rule. How does that play out for the decks you can play?
Yeah, of course. So depending which tournament you're attending, especially the online tournaments which are held on one day only, there will be time limits for your rounds. There might be extra turns. Sometimes it's like every player gets an extra turn, but that's, I don't know, sometimes this, and in the past it took a lot of time. So the extra turns took almost as long as the whole 75 or 95 minutes beforehand. That's why most of the tournament organizers went to 90 to 95 minutes without extra turns. This might favor some proactive decks more than Stexia decks. Just make sure that you inform yourself about the specific tournament structure and ask yourself if the list you want to play is profiting off of it or suffering off of it.
I mean, that of course makes sense from a tournament organizer's point of view, because you have to, like, you're renting out a place, you have to get over with the tournament so people can eventually leave and go home again, right? So they don't have to wait for hours and hours for other people to finish. So that makes sense. It's not hating on Stex decks, it's just the reality of logistics makes it impossible for you to have like unlimited time round times.
Yeah, take an example, Mox Masters. It's like 5 Swiss rounds going 90 minutes without extra turns. That's already consuming a lot of the time. So if you try to be good, you try to compete, right? So you want to make the finals, but I can tell you, like, it's at least gonna take 10 to 15 hours to win the whole tournament. So that's also something you have to be prepared of if you want to attend a one-day online tournament.
So you're not playing like 5 relaxed rounds, you're like playing and you're active for 10 to 15 hours, and you have to bring your best game, right? Because you're in the tournament, you're trying to win the tournament.
If you win fast or if you lose fast, you will have a longer break until the next round starts. But I had several occasions where we went to time, we ended in a draw, and then we had 5 minutes until the next round fired. Yeah, which makes sense from the TO perspective, because they just have to keep going, so it doesn't take 20 hours. But from a player perspective, it takes a lot of stamina and concentration to stay focused.
Yeah, makes sense.
And relevant.
And then on the topic of draws, like of course in every game of Magic there is the possibility to have a draw, but it's much more prevalent in tournament EDH, right? So how does that play out? When does a draw happen? How? So I know some people force a draw. How does that play out? Why do you do that?
Okay, so you get usually you get 5 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, and 0 points for a loss. And depending on the amount of players who attended and where's the cut and how many Swiss rounds there are, you will most likely need something between, let's say, 7 and 12 points to make the top 16 cut, right? So when it gets to the end, to the last couple of Swiss rounds, you can already get a feeling. You can already get the feeling if you have to win, or maybe if a draw is enough to get you there. And that's when you have to really just check the brackets and calculate how aggressive you want to go into the last couple of rounds. If you know you have to get the win, I recommend just stay focused, get in there, do proper mulligans, and try to win it all. But if you're already sitting on 10, 11 points, maybe a draw just gets you there, and then you take the save point. You ask the other players if they're in the same boat as you. So intentional draws in the last Swiss round happen a lot at the upper brackets, because people are like, they don't want to take any risks. They take the save point, they chill for the next 90 minutes, they relax and
just basically refuel, and then don't risk getting a loss.
Exactly. Yeah, other from the intentional draws, there is also the potential of normal draws in the first rounds. Just keep in mind that a draw is always a possibility. So even if you die due to your opponent's killing you, you could still get 1 point for a draw. So you will not get 0 points if you die and the pot draws. Yeah. So that's also something to keep in mind. You're still part of the pot. You can still talk and be vocal, and maybe you will still get a point, although you might have been killed by commander damage on turn 5. I don't know.
Okay, so now we know how a tournament is structured. We know what's different in a tournament from a regular game or regular games of cEDH. So what decks are more prevalent, or what decks have more success? What decks do not perform that well? What's your experience? Because I know you played one of my decks before, but I know you had a lot of success with Najeela recently.
If you take a look at the last couple of top 16s, you'll see a lot of different decks, a lot of different archetypes. So from my perspective, the meta is very healthy. I think you could win a cEDH tournament with any deck. We had Kalia winning, we had Godo winning, but also like more typical decks like Vinota and Blue Farm. So it's very healthy in general, but there are still some archetypes your deck should be able to compete against. One of the most famous ones is Tymna Crom. That's a very prevalent deck. You will see also Thrasios Brustal with a vast majority of different archetypes. It's one of the most popular is probably Comedian's Dawnwaker Thrasios list, but there's also the Advantage Blue Pot, so a bit more stacks here. But Thrasios Bruce is very prevalent, especially when it gets to top 16. I also recommend asking yourself how your deck performs versus very fast decks like Roger Silas, and also something like the proactive Najeela layered list I've been playing. So in general, those are decks you will at least see at the top 16 usually, but you already might face them in the Swiss round. I personally had a lot of success with Najeela recently. I think one of the reasons is that Najeela, like the proactive Najeela list, doesn't really have a bad matchup and really profits off of the online tournament structures, because Najeela gives you the opportunity to pressure the table in a decent amount of time. Like we talked about, it's only 90 minutes, no extra turns, and also gives you like a lot of plan B, plan C options depending on pot composition, turn order, and game state. Other decks like win-conless decks, in my opinion, don't perform as well because let's say there are going to be 4 or 5 Swiss rounds, 4 or 5 draws will not give you the top 16 cut most likely. 4 to 5 points won't be enough to make top 16. And if you're going to play something like, I don't know, let's pick win-conless Shorikai, or you just drop down the humility or some heavy stacks effects and you just can't close out the game because your win-con suit isn't just that good, it's going to be tough to make the top 16 cut. Although at the last Treasure Series there have been, I think, 1 or 2 Shorikai lists making the top 16, so that's pretty cool to see. I don't know the list exactly,
rare.
So they might be a bit more they might have some more win cons, or I don't know, but usually the proactive stuff, the more mid-rangier stuff is better suited for those kind of events.
Okay, so proactive mid-rangey stuff. Would you say higher color decks perform noticeably better than lower color decks? Because like recently Godo won a tournament, right? So everyone was like, well, you can play monocolored decks in tournaments, but that's like doesn't happen often, right?
Yeah, but I don't know, like Godo wins any game of cEDH if they always have the Treasonous Ogre with Cavern of Souls on turn 2, in my opinion. So it's obviously, I think that's what I said, like any deck can win nowadays. I don't think it's very, very dependent on colors. I just can talk for myself, what I've been playing. I played, like you said, I played the proactive Roger Tavish Turbo Nos list. I also played a bunch of different 4 and 5 color lists. I noticed that I have more success playing more colors because I get access to more tutors, to better interaction, to just better card quality overall. And currently, you don't really get punished for having a very greedy mana base with all the fetches, all the duels. Because decks are very suffering lately. I think it started with the printing of the channel lands. I noticed that you can get away with a lot of greedy 5 and 4 color stuff, and that's why I will just keep playing it until something changes, right?
So I've talked on my channel about parasitic decks before, and also about rogue decks and off-meta decks. So what would you say? Would you more recommend to play a well-established meta deck, or would you say it's also very viable to have like a rogue deck or a parasitic deck or an off-meta deck to take your opponents by surprise and play something that they might not be expecting and might not be ready for or might be underestimating?
Yeah, I think both are viable. So if you're planning attending a tournament, I just recommend you play something you're comfortable with, something you know, or something you have enough experience with, right? So that's what I would usually recommend. The Roger Tavish Turbo Nos list I played at the House event, the Swiss runs have been great for me. I just won on turn 2 multiple times. They thought I would be the stacks list or whatnot. But the second it went to like the last or the fourth Swiss or the second Swiss, and you start facing better players. They know what you're up to, and they sniff what you're trying to do on your turn 1. They keep up with the action. So if the table is prepared, it's very hard to win a game with a all-in deck or a parasitic deck. It's definitely doable, but it just depends on your opponents. If your opponents disrespect your deck, you could definitely get there. And if you just play the 4 or 5 color soup, just like I said at the beginning, you don't really have a bad matchup, in my opinion. And therefore, it's a bit more consistent, in my opinion, to make a top cut with a more generic, good stuff, high cut quality list.
Makes a lot of sense because you always have the opportunity to pivot into a different kind of game, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And some of the more parasitic lists, they rely on the opponents to stop each other, but you might not get the pot where this is the case, and then you just lose because you don't play them, for example.
And then you can't interact and just sit there, watch other people win the game.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. All right, Memo. So, what would you recommend? How should I get ready for my first tournament if I want to participate in one?
So first of all, I would just take a look at the different tournaments that are viable. Are there cEDH tournaments near you? Are there in-person events? Are you more interested in the online events? When do they start? Take a look at the last release deck lists. Maybe there's footage like VODs on Twitch or on YouTube. Just get a feeling for who is playing there, what's the meta like, what what decks do perform well, what decks are kind of weird. What are decks are you playing? Are they tuned for a tournament? Are there cards you could swap? Are you playing cute cards that aren't really tournament viable? Stuff like that,
Would you recommend that I grind a lot of games with my deck before I go into a tournament, or should I just play whatever and then start with a tournament? Because I know people have different approaches to that, right? Because you kind of get burned out if you play your deck a lot.
So it really depends on the person, the type of person you are. I noticed that I feel comfortable with a deck after I played something between 25 to 50 games. That's when I get a hang of it. That's when I put the tutor in this deck and I already know exactly what I need in this situation. But I know that other people's, I think it was Kevin Tishu from cEDH who won Chaos 6 versus me. I think he told me he played barely like 20 games on the energy list. So other people are more comfortable to just grab a meta deck and just go with it because they have a lot of game experience or whatever. But I like to have a decent tournament preparation a couple of weeks before the tournament and question each card after games. Did the card perform well? How well did the card perform? Did I miss something I cut recently? For example, the last tournament I attended, one day before the tournament, I cut the Texium Probe because I felt like I wanted a piece of removal more, and I always felt like a Texium Probe is the worst card in my Nagila build. And I resolved some Adnos in the Swiss, and one of the Adnoses just didn't get me there, and that's when I second-guessed myself if Texium Probe would have worked. So after the tournament, I felt like I missed the Texium Probe, and therefore it's back in. So that's the kind of stuff that really helps to evaluate.
So you personally, you play a lot of games and then you constantly reevaluate your list, make the changes, and then reevaluate again. It's like like a continuous process to optimize the list for the tournament.
And you have to be honest to yourself. I think they say you have to win a cEDH game if your deck wins 25% of the games. It's a good deck. I had to bring it to you, but this most likely won't be enough to make a top 16 cut. You will have to look at something between 40 to 50% of a win rate to have a chance of making top 16, because 4 to 5 Swiss rounds just isn't that much. And there will be a lot of tiebreakers due to the nature of online cEDH tournaments that are held on one day. So if you are in a tournament prep, if you decided on a deck, you should track your win rate, you should track your games, and to get a feeling of how many games am I actually winning. And if you're sitting at 15 to 20% win rate after 50 games, I'm not sure if this deck will really perform that well in a tournament.
I mean, if you have a 25% win rate, your deck is average. That's where it should be, right? But if you want to win a tournament, your deck should be above average. Your performance should be above average, because like with every other competition, you won't win a tournament being average. You have to be above that.
Exactly. You might be lucky. You might have a good day. You might go first in each Swiss round, right? But those things aren't what we're calculating for. We try to control the things we can control, and tracking something like your win rate. That's what helped me a lot to evaluate decks and card choices.
Those are definitely some good tips. So if I decided to participate in a tournament and I already know what tournament I want to participate in, where can I get more additional resources, additional help to like further my game, advance to the next level, and be like on my best game?
So what helped me a lot is watching especially YouTube content like yours, like educational YouTube content. I love like your rule explainings. I also like comedians' top 4 or top 16 breakdowns that helped me also a lot to become better. There are a lot of different podcasts related to tournament EDH or cEDH in general that help me improve my gameplay. Other than that, there is the possibility of do coaching from very experienced players. There are different experienced players that offer coaching. I'm one of them. Yeah, that's also something you can do to improve your gameplay.
Okay, so coaching basically means I contact you and then you take the time to help me improve my list, help me improve my game plan for a compensation.
Exactly.
I will definitely make sure to link some of those videos from Ian down below, some of my educational stuff, of course, and I will also link your Moxfield or your Twitter down below so people can contact you if they need some help. Alright, and yeah, that's it. I hope this video helped you to get ready for your next or your first upcoming tournament. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment. This is Eisenherz, and
Auf Wiedersehen.